Okay. Mr. Receiver, it's 1 o'clock. I think we're live and recording.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Dowry. I serve as receiver for the city of Chester. Today is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. Thank you for joining us today for the Municipal Financial Recovery Advisory Committee meeting. We are joined here in person remotely, virtually, by Mr. Andrew Sheaf on behalf of the Governor's Office and Department of Community and Economic Development. Also, Ms. Kelly Diaz on behalf of Delaware County Council, and Councilman Morgan on behalf of the City of Chester. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As always, joined by our Chief of Staff on this engagement, Mr. Vijay Kapoor, and Executive Assistant all along from the Department of Community and Economic Development, Mr. Cody Dill. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We'll acknowledge that Mayor Kirkland has not joined us here yet, but we'll see if he signs on here in the next few minutes. For calling this meeting to order, we'll jump over to public comment. Mr. Dill, would you mind speaking to public comment?
Sure, thank you. So we actually had not received any public comments up until this morning, but none of the comments received really pertain to any of the matters before this committee. They were all copy and paste messages regarding the sale of the CWA, which I believe is still ongoing in the courts. So other than that, we have not received any other public comments. We'd just like to continue all of the public to send their comments into info@chesterreceivership.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. Would you mind, we always on these meetings encourage the community to reach out if there's anything they'd like to discuss and make ourselves available. Excited to share, but I won't steal your thunder about the additional outreach, the platforms that you added on this week or last week.
Yes, absolutely. So we now have an active Instagram account with the username Chester_receivership. So if you're not active on Facebook, but you are active on Instagram, please give us a follow over there. We'll be posting all of the same stuff on both platforms and also using that as a link to promote these meetings, directing the traffic here. And we also will be compiling all of our videos onto a YouTube page, which is also Chester Receivership. And those are kind of ongoing. It takes a little bit of time to process them and get them uploaded, but on an ongoing basis, we will try to get all of these MFRAC videos stored on the YouTube page as well. Again, that's Chester Receivership, and the Instagram page again is Chester_receivership.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. All right, our next agenda item is to speak to the status of the recovery plan. And Mr. Kapoor, would you like to add anything here, or do you want to defer to the presentation?
Mr. Receiver, I'll just defer to the presentation. We have 2 items on the agenda today as it relates to the update. One dealing with the parking RFP, and another dealing with city inspections and the deputy director of inspectors position. But I think that conversation is going to take a fair amount of time. I don't have a bigger update other than that.
And I'll for the next agenda item, the update for the receiver, I'll defer as well, but the only thing I want to mention is the vacancies, continuing to encourage folks to visit the city's website and to view job postings and encourage folks to apply. Several vacant positions with the city, and there's an ongoing recruitment effort. So encouraging all to apply. For top priority for today is to present on 2 items, the parking RFP status and the deputy director of inspection positions. Mr. Kapoor, I'll defer to you. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you for that. Mr. Receiver, let me just go ahead and I've got some slides over here I just want to load up. If you could bear with me while I do that, I would appreciate it. Can you all see that? Okay, very good. Let me just move one thing over here so I can see it. Good afternoon, members of the public and the MFRAC committee. I've got 2 items here that we'd like to bring to the MFRAC for discussion. One of which has been on here a few times, and we feel the need to bring it back and try and address it so we can hopefully push through and resolve it. The other, a newer item, but one that was relating to what Chief of Staff Leitner had discussed at last week's meeting as part of his plan to improve operations at the city of Chester. So what we were really trying to do here, and what has prompted this presentation, were two, I guess what I could refer to as non-actions that were taken at last week's city council meeting on March 8th, where a group of elected officials, the mayor, 3 members of council, refused to move forward on 2 items, which from our perspective are important to addressing quality of life and health and safety issues in the city. That was not authorizing an RFP for temporary parking management services and a comprehensive parking study. And the second is regarding hiring an individual for the position of Deputy Director of Inspections. We're bringing these issues here to the committee, to the public, for discussion, hopefully for resolution, in the event that the receiver decides that he needs to go to court in order to address them. So let me first start with the parking RFP, and I've essentially divided this up for discussions as to the parking RFP and then the Deputy Director of Inspectors. As those of you who have been following MFRAC committee meetings know, the parking contract the city entered into with PFS has really been the subject of multiple meetings. Me personally, have spent a considerable amount of time trying to address it. And we're trying to move forward with it right now. We are trying to move forward with parking enforcement in the city of Chester. Those of you know that a Commonwealth Court ruled that the parking contract was void. And we are trying to move forward with an RFP. We thought that City Council was going to move forward with authorization for that RFP at last week's council meeting. By a 4-to-1 vote, it did not move forward. The mayor and 3 members of council refused to move it forward. Councilmember Roots was supportive of moving it forward. And so we want to talk here about this parking contract. We want to talk about what the situation is. And we also want to talk about what we're trying to do. And again, hopefully how we move this forward. So just historically, for those of you who don't know, on September 19th, the Commonwealth Court found that the parking contract between the city of Chester and PFS, the parking manager, was void, and that the receiver could terminate the parking contract. The court was unequivocal in its decision. It was very clear. It stated that the contract the city failed to comply with advertising and competitive bidding requirements, and as a result, the contract is void. Also noted here on slide 6, and both of these slides had been presented in previous MFRACs, that it wasn't a small defect, that the contract was void, and that part of the reason that we have those provisions in the 3rd class city code for bidding is those mandatory requirements exist to invite competition and to guard against favoritism, improvidence, extravagance, fraud, and corruption in the award of municipal contracts. So what it means for a contract to be void is that legally it essentially never existed in the first place. So it means that whatever services or whatever contract, and I put that in quotes, existed, they no longer can be performed under the law because, again, the contract is void. So the receiver cannot agree to modify a contract with PFS, the parking manager, because there was no contract to begin with because it's void. What we have also done, the receiver has also done through this process, again, given our view of the parking contract, and our view that it was not in the best interest of the city, that its terms were onerous. And again, we've had presentations in December of 2021 here at MFRAC where we talked about our reasoning behind that. We have also taken the step of seeking to terminate the parking contract in bankruptcy court. So the issue of whether the contract was void was happening in state court. We have also taken steps, again, just for completeness from our view, to terminate the parking contract in bankruptcy court. So again, different court, different rationale for termination. And what that's called in bankruptcy court is a contract rejection. It's a specific term to reject a contract in bankruptcy court. And the bankruptcy court held a hearing on the receiver's motion to reject that contract on February 27th of 2023, so a couple of weeks ago. And although we're still awaiting a final ruling from the bankruptcy judge, at the hearing, she did state that she was inclined to reject the contract. Now, again, we're waiting to see that. We want to make sure that again, we hopefully have a decision from her, but that in no way impacts what the Commonwealth Court has already found, which again, is that the contract is void. And by virtue of the fact that we are seeking to reject the contract in bankruptcy court, in no way indicates that we don't believe the contract is void. What we are doing here is basically exhausting all possible options out here and making it very clear to the residents of Chester, to PFS, and to others that this contract is no longer in effect, and that we need to move forward with a new way of addressing parking in Chester. So after the court decision in September, I want to take you through a couple of slides here of kind of what has happened since that, because I know there's been some questions from the public about what's been happening, particularly those residents who live in Sun Hill who have been in touch with me quite a bit, wondering what's been happening, what's happened next, and I want to set the record straight and be very clear about what the receiver's been doing. And to the extent there's any question about what we're listing here or talking about here, we have the emails and we have the evidence behind there to back up what I'm listing here. And again, our goal here is to try and move forward, but we want to be absolutely clear to the residents who have been asking about parking enforcement, what's been going on, and why we don't have a parking contract and parking enforcement in the city of Chester right now. So you will recall September 19th, the Commonwealth Court finds that the contract is void. Then at the September 22nd MFRAC meeting, which again is on our Facebook page, we talked about what our next steps were going to be. And that was to ask City Council to authorize a parking RFP on September 23rd, so the very next day, to engage a vendor to perform temporary parking enforcement, develop a comprehensive plan, and implement and manage a parking program. There were only 3 council members at that meeting. They refused to issue that authorization at the meeting, saying that they had questions. And then we sat down immediately after that meeting, the receiver and myself, to try and understand why that authorization wasn't moved forward. And again, we understood that there were some questions, and we were willing to quickly try and work through those. On September 28th of 2022, the receiver sent a termination letter to PFS that had an effective date of October 1st, basically saying your contract has been declared void, you need to stop your services. And that was sent on the 28th with an effective date of October 1st. On September 29th, the city solicitor emailed the receiver and myself saying the city had some questions regarding the RFP and requested a meeting. So we set up a meeting as quickly as we could, which was set for October 5th of 2022, so the very next week. We met with City Council and the city solicitor to discuss their questions. Some of those questions included issues related to the parking authority. And we understood that there were some questions there, and then we wanted to set up a meeting with the parking authority to try and resolve those questions. So the very next day, the receiver contacted the acting chair of the parking authority board, Mr. Dwayne Lee, to set up a meeting to discuss the RFP. That meeting was set for October 11th. We have the meeting on October 11th. We meet with the parking authority, the acting chair, as well as other members of the board to discuss the situation, to discuss the RFP. I was at that meeting, the receiver was at that meeting, the chief of staff, Leonard Leitner, was at that meeting, and sends the Parking Authority Board the draft parking RFP. That following week, Mr. Leitner meets with city officials about the draft RFP, also talks with the receiver, makes some changes to the RFP based on input. And then he reaches back out on October 24th of 2022 to Mr. Lee, asking the Parking Authority's position on the RFP. Then on the 28th, Mr. Lee responds that he is in favor of sending out the parking RFP, but that other authority board members had questions. So Mr. Leitner then repeatedly followed up to ask for those questions to be sent, but he never received a response. Then on November 8th of 2022, the receiver filed the plan modification. That was the one dealing with operations. And subsequent to that, as many of you know, on November 10th, the receiver filed the Chapter 9 bankruptcy. On November 23rd, I asked Chief of Staff Leitner to again reach out to the Parking Authority to see if they have any questions. Mr. Leitner does that, and there's no response. On February 14th, as many of you know, Judge Seisler of the Commonwealth Court approved the full plan modification. Then on February 15th, again, trying to move forward here, trying to move forward with the RFP, the receiver calls a meeting with the city, mayor, and city council regarding the parking RFP. To that point, there was a sticking point as to who would be on the RFP committee. The mayor wanted representation on that committee, and the receiver agreed at that meeting on February 15th to allow the mayor to appoint 3 members of the RFP committee. And the mayor initially appointed himself, Councilman Morgan, and the police commissioner Gretzky. The other members of that committee were appointed by the receiver, the three members from the receiver. That would be the receiver, myself, Ms. Kelly Settles from Fox Chase, and then the 7th member of the committee would have been Chief of Staff Leitner. At that meeting, the receiver asked the mayor, Councilman Morgan, and Councilman Roots, who were there, whether there were any other issues with the RFP. And there were no further issues other than who was on the RFP committee. Chief of Staff Leitner then sends out the parking RFP for final comments. At that meeting, we agreed to a schedule, and we have meeting minutes written by Chief of Staff Leitner that set that forth. February 27th, we were going to have a deadline for any further comments on the RFP. On March 2nd, the final RFP was to be sent to legal. On March 6th, the RFP was to be considered at the deliberative meeting. And on March 8th, which again was last Tuesday, City Council was to authorize the release of the RFP. On February 21st, after this meeting, wanting to make sure that this was not going to be held up any further, or that to the extent there were any issues, that we would address them. On February 21st, I emailed Mayor Kirkland, Councilman Morgan, Councilman Roots, and City Solicitor Schuster to ask if there were any issues. I did not receive any response to that email. On February 27th, I again emailed Mayor Kirkland, Councilman Morgan, Councilman Roots, and City Solicitor Schuster to ask if there were any issues with the parking RFP. The city solicitor just responds to ask that the parking RFP be sent to him to be put on council's agenda. I received no response from any elected officials. On March 1st, the receiver, Councilman Roots, and the Chief of Staff Leitner met at a scheduled recovery plan meeting. Mayor and Councilman Morgan were invited, but were absent. We didn't get a reason for the absence, but we discussed, again, the RFP at that meeting to see if there were any issues, to see if Chief of Staff Leitner had heard of any concerns that the city had about the parking RFP that would further delay it or that would need to be addressed. And there were none at that meeting. On March 6th, the authorization for the parking RFP was considered at council's deliberative session, and it remained on the agenda for consideration at the March 8th meeting. And then at the March 8th meeting last week, again, despite weeks of planning without objection that I've just taken you through, the mayor and city council voted 4-1 not to advance the parking RFP. Councilmember Roots voted in favor of issuing the RFP, which kind of brings us to where we are now. And what we were trying to understand from the receiver's end at this point is what is the rationale and why this parking RFP was not moved forward. So I went back and looked at the council meeting, which is recorded and which can be viewed on the city's website at chestercity.com/live. And some of the council members and the mayor provided some of their rationale as to why they didn't want to move forward with that. And I want to list what those are now. And I also want to talk through kind of our response to those. Again, in the hopes that we're going to be able to move forward with this RFP. Mayor Kirkland at that meeting gave 3 reasons why he was not supportive of moving forward with the RFP. One, that he said a parking study had already been done. And you can see that timestamp here on the site. That the second issue was that his view was the parking contract should have been modified instead of terminated. And that's a direct quote from the mayor there, saying that we've modified other things along with our receiver being in receivership. I would have hoped that we could have modified the parking situation here in the city of Chester. And then the third response, or the third reason, was that the receiver did not have the authority to enter into an agreement with Widener. So let's go through each one of those and kind of address them. Hopefully here for the last time. With respect to the statement that a parking study has already been done, we have only been able to find one parking study that was done by PFS. And that was a draft entitled City of Chester On-Street Parking Occupancy Assessment, Widener University Area. And it was dated May 17th of 2019. That study was attached as an exhibit to the city's and PFS's December 16th, 2019 filing in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. That was the matter involving Widener's injunction. And again, assuming that this is the study that the mayor is referencing, and I tend to think it is because we've been provided with no other study out there. That study is not adequate for what the receiver is trying to accomplish with respect to parking. So first, let's look at this study. And I have a copy of it here. It is also to show you here as well. You can see that as well. We have a copy of it. We're happy to provide it to the public as well. But if you just first take a look at this, and if you can see, can you see all this? See this? Okay. So number one is it involves just the Widener University area. It's dated May 17th of 2019, and it also says draft here, not just on the cover page, but also on every other page here. And again, this study was filed in court by the city and by PFS in the Widener matter. It only focuses on the area around Widener, and it's not citywide, which is actually what the receiver wants here. The other important issue here as it relates to this study is that it's dated May 17th of 2019. Why that's important is that this study was conducted after the city signed the contracts with PFS. The city's contracts that it signed with PFS were dated April 25th of 2018 and September 5th of 2018. When you do a parking study, the purpose of a parking study is to be done before you enter into a contract, not after you enter into a contract. And this study was clearly done after the contract was entered into. Furthermore, this draft study was also done after Widener began the litigation. Widener filed its injunction on January 2nd of 2019. Again, this study is dated May 17th of 2019. So we've got some significant problems with this parking study. Number one, the receiver wants a comprehensive study of parking throughout the entire city. This study only focuses on basically on Widener. It doesn't include downtown. It doesn't include areas around Crozier, and it doesn't include areas around the soccer stadium, and it doesn't include other neighborhoods as well. So the comprehensive study that the receiver wants as part of the RFP is one that looks citywide not just in a narrow area. Second issue we have clearly is the study is marked draft, which means it's not finalized. And again, we have no indication that this study was ever done, was ever finalized, excuse me. And this copy that we are showing here is the same copy that was filed in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. The third point over here is that a comprehensive study needs to take place before a contract is entered into, not after. And clearly, this study was conducted after the city entered into the contracts. Study was dated May 17th. The city entered into contracts in April of 2018 and September of 2018. And, you know, as you can tell really from the contract, it really appears that this study was prompted by Widener's litigation, which again was filed on January 2nd of 2019. There's really no other logical reason to conduct such a study at that time. There's no reason to spend money on a parking study after you've entered into a contract, after litigation, unless what you're really doing here is trying to respond to the litigation. As many of you remember from our December 21st presentation by Mr. Eric Haggett from a consulting firm, a professional parking consulting firm in Chicago, he indicated that these type of parking studies are done prior to entering into any contract, and that clearly was not done here. The fourth problem that we have, putting aside all those other issues, is that this study is too old. It was conducted almost 4 years ago and prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. What we need and what the RFP is seeking is an up-to-date comprehensive study of the entire city, not just the area around Widener University. That is what we need here, and that is what the parking RFP is seeking to do. So to the extent that there's a concern or an argument that a study has already been done, this really isn't what we need, and we need a new study. The second statement that was made was that the parking contract should have been modified instead of terminated. Again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, the Commonwealth Court found that the contract was void. So you cannot modify a void contract because, again, it never existed in the first place. So legally, there's nothing there to modify. So we can't modify the contract. The second point is, even if we could, PFS said to us that the contract didn't make sense financially unless it included Widener's campus. But since 2019, there has been an injunction in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas that forbids meters from being placed on Widener's campus. And that litigation is ongoing. And even if the city was successful in that litigation and PFS was successful in that litigation, it would take years of litigation to resolve. Widener has been very adamant and been very clear that they would appeal any decision. And so any resolution of that was going to take years, meaning that the city was not going to get a dime of revenue out of that area. The other point that we'll make, and we've made it previously, is that the contract terms in this contract are so bad for the city, financially and otherwise, that to us, it remains inconceivable how the city even agreed to it in the first place. And to the extent that the mayor or other council members would like to modify the contract, and believe me, we've been having discussions about this parking thing for years, we have never been provided their suggestions as to how the contract should be modified. So if there is if again, and this is even assuming you can modify it, and again, it's a void contract, so you can't modify it. But if you're saying to us that you would rather have it modified, we don't have any documentation, any suggestion as to how that contract should be modified. Now, the third point here related to an agreement that the receiver entered into with Widener. And again, we've talked about this a couple of times here at MFRAC. We'll discuss it again. The agreement with Widener has nothing to do with contracting for temporary parking enforcement and doing a comprehensive study. The city, as I said earlier, was receiving next to nothing from the parking contract with PFS and was not going to for the foreseeable future because of the injunction. The city received $325,000 from Widener last year. which is probably at least as much as it's received from PFS from the entire parking contract to date. And so this agreement, just again, so folks who may be tuning in for the first time know about it. And again, we discussed this at the December 13th MFRAC meeting. Let's discuss what it is again. And that agreement was starting in 2022. The city would receive $3.25 million over 10 years, $325,000 a year to be used to fund general fund operations. The city received $325,000 last year. It's budgeted $325,000 this year. And that 2022 payment is at least as much as the city has received from the parking contract for those entire 4 years to date. And certainly after the payment that Widener is supposed to make this year, we're going to be well ahead of what the parking contract has netted for the city. That agreement with Widener, those of you who are in the Sun Hill community, makes no change to the residential parking permit program. That parking permit program would be started again, and the same streets that had been done before would be the same ones that would be done now. And this slide here on slide 24, this offer was discussed at the December 28th, 2021 MFRAC meeting. So we have been talking about this agreement for at least 1.5 years, or around that time, maybe one and a quarter years. It's no surprise to anybody. I think this is at least the third time I've mentioned it at an MFRAC. And so our response here is if the mayor and other city elected officials believe that the receiver exceeded his authority to enter into that contract with Widener, into that agreement with Widener, Act 47 gives them the right to go to court and to challenge it. You have a right to do it. But that hasn't been done. They haven't done that. And I'll point you to that section, section 709B of Act 47. And it states, any elected or appointed official of a distressed municipality or authority may petition Commonwealth Court to enjoin any action of the receiver that is contrary to this chapter. So again, if you believe that, if the elected officials believe, four of the elected officials believe that the receiver exceeded his authority, they have every right to petition Commonwealth Court to enjoin that action of the receiver. And section 709B is very clear about it. That's 709A is the same section that allows the receiver to seek mandamus. This is the flip side of that of Act 47. It allows city elected officials to go to Commonwealth Court. Same thing. And again, that hasn't been done, and we've been made aware of this for several months now. But here's the thing: if you do decide, if the elected officials or four of the elected officials do decide to try to void the agreement by going to Commonwealth Court, which again is their right to do if they so choose, here are the consequences of that action. First, if they're successful, the city's going to need to pay back the $325,000 that Widener provided in 2022. Second, you're going to have to find $325,000 to fill the budget gap in 2023, because the 2023 budget, which was passed unanimously by City Council, included and explicitly included the $325,000 payment for Widener in 2023. So basically, what we would have to do this year is find $650,000 to pay Widener back, and it blows a hole in the budget going forward for the city that we have no way of filling. But again, like if that's what the elected officials want to do, they have every right to do it. But just understand that is the consequence of that. And it's confusing to us from the receiver's end why the city would challenge that agreement, because there's been an injunction on Widener's regarding parking on Widener's campus since 2019. So it's not like we're going to be getting money from Widener's campus anyway. That's going to be tied up in litigation. And you recall, a Commonwealth Court has found that the contract is void because the proper procurement regulations were not followed. So assuming that the litigation starts up again in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas, Widener's pretty clearly going to argue that there's a decision out there in the Commonwealth Court stating that this contract is void. And that means there's very little likelihood of PFS or the city winning that case in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. Not to mention the fact that the receiver has sought to get that contract rejected in the bankruptcy court. So practically speaking, all you would really be doing by trying to void that contract is, again, making the city have to pay $650,000 and having no real way of getting that money back, certainly from the parking area. So this is my last slide on the parking discussion. I'm going to kick it back over to the MFRAC committee on this, but we are ready to send out an RFP for temporary parking services and a comprehensive parking study. The receiver is ready. The city's chief of staff is ready. We're ready to have the parking RFP released. The issue right now is that the mayor and 3 city council members are not moving to authorize it to proceed. And we would like to discuss what needs to happen at the MFRAC meeting in order to get this parking RFP out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Before we jump on the last bullet point of what needs to happen, I'll open it up to the committee to ask, are there any questions of Mr. Kapoor or myself or the city?
Yeah, I'll just make a few comments. Just going off of some of the things that was said in the presentation. The meeting that happened in, I guess, roughly September, Councilman Roots was there present. The spreadsheet said that he was absent. He was there present. Initially, he said no, I believe. And then after some deliberation, he came back and changed his mind. However, he did not have or bring forward any questions, comments, concerns that he had at deliberative, though he had questions, comments, and concerns regarding the RFP. The reason that one did not go through for the public is because it was really, we did not have council did not have any time to review the RFP, the specification, that the language that was within the RFP. It was brought to us maybe a few out of 72 hours, maybe before the meeting, I guess. We didn't have a thorough time to even look at that RFP. When it came to the meeting that was had in, I want to say February, when he mentioned that I was not present. Physically, I was not present. I did try to get on the virtual meeting via Zoom and or Microsoft Teams. I was not accepted into that meeting. So I'm not sure who hosts that meeting or who allows individuals in that meeting, but I was not provided the access to or admitted into that meeting. Comments wasn't provided from me as far as what I stated at the council meeting last week. I do believe that we need parking management here in the city of Chester and parking enforcement here in the city of Chester and all throughout the city of Chester. We most certainly need a study done for the entire city of Chester. My comments is directed as far as when it comes to the parking management and not including Widener and having Widener isolated from that parking management. So I encourage us to find a way to move forward with it. And I want to work together so we can move forward with a parking enforcement here in the city of Chester. But I do think that Widener's area should be included within that. And I know that there's some other discussions or has been discussions regarding the agreement that was signed with the receiver and Widener on our behalf. But I truly believe that Widener should be included in that and that they should not be isolated or not included for, I think it's roughly 10 years, I want to say that agreement was set up for. So, but those are my comments. And that's why I did not agree to approve and move forward on it. Not that the language in the contract, in the RFP was not fitting to what we need, but solely because it did not include the section of Widener University.
All right. Well, let's respond to a couple of those. Thank you for the correction. Councilman Roots was present last September, I think that was for the council meeting. But as far as the current RFP, if I can boil your comments down to 2 points, there's the inclusion of Widener in the RFP. I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't do that. You mentioned Widener not being included in the current parking RFP. The current RFP does include a study that is citywide, which does include the Widener campus. That point has been made several times. Is there anything else about the RFP that does? Well, then the second point was the 10-year agreement. This agreement for Widener to pay the city $3.25 million has nothing to do with the injunction that has been filed and on the record since 2019. That case can still move forward. So if the city were to prevail in that, then there could be further discussion. But at this time, there's an injunction that's preventing the inclusion of putting meters on Widener's campus, not the agreement that will be prohibit that. So even if we wanted to put that kind of language in the RFP, we couldn't because there's an injunction. Further, there's a need to do a study first before committing to any kind of a plan. But understanding that we can't get around the injunction, are you comfortable with the language knowing that the Widener campus is included in the study?
Where can you provide insight on where we are with the injunction?
I believe Ken Schuster, city solicitor, should provide that update to you, but Mr. Kapoor, did you have something?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been where it's been for the last
For a long
2.5
time.
years. Yeah, so it's stuck there. It's not going anywhere.
But why not,
and
DJ?
yeah, I mean, it's not going anywhere. They were in the discovery phase. And then, you know, what's happened is since that time, the Commonwealth Court has come down with its ruling that the contract is void. So assuming it starts back up again, the first thing I expect to have happen is for Widener to file a motion essentially saying that the contract is void and that, you know, that the court should take judicial notice of the Commonwealth Court's decision. And so, I mean, at that point, I think, Mr. Schuster will be able to tell you more on that. And just again, to the receiver's point. So the point is, we're not getting meters on Widener's campus for years. And we're also not getting a dime of money there. The other point that I think the receiver made, again, I just want to make clear here, is in the RFP for the comprehensive study, Widener is included in the comprehensive study. We are not isolating Widener. They are in there for the RFP for the study. So I just want to be clear about that as well. They were not at one point before, you're right, but in the one in the version that was going to council in February, in the ones that were at the meeting, that has been removed. So it is a citywide study, including Widener.
You're right. That is the change. It is included in. And again, I agree that they should be included in the study, and I'm aware that they're going to be included in the study. I don't know of many areas of other municipalities where we have to be in court, or there's no movement on anything for, I guess, over 4 years at this point now. So most certainly would love to see how we can get that engaged. And you said you assume that it'll move forward. And in my opinion, if this is an important matter and vital for the city of Chester, the residents, the homeowners here, and to talk about, I won't even just talk about revenue, I'll just talk about safety and the enforcement of it for the businesses and to patronize the businesses to make sure that residents can safely park in front of their households. Most certainly, I think we need to find a way to bring all of these things and put the pieces of the puzzle all together, and that we should definitely be able to have some updates on what's moving forward, if anything, with the injunction, because going over 4 years, I think that's a little absurd.
Going over for it, but yeah, but you do understand that this RFP is not going to resolve that litigation, correct?
Understood.
All right. So what issue do you have with releasing the RFP?
Again, my issue was that the management of it did not include Widener University.
That was resolved well before the last city council meeting. So are there any remaining issues with the RFP?
No, that was the issue. And that was what I stated publicly in the meeting.
But it was already resolved before that meeting. So
what was already resolved, Mr. Receiver?
including Widener's campus in the study.
No, I'm not, sorry, I didn't say anything about the study. What I said was the management of the parking did not include Widener. The study is completely fine. The entire citywide study, I understand and is supportive of that.
This RFP only speaks to 2 points: a study and temporary enforcement until the study is completed. So
is the enforcement not management?
I'm sorry?
Parking? Is the enforcement not management of the parking?
Again, management of parking that can't get around an injunction. So what is it about the management and the study that is in this RFP that you're taking exception with?
Again,
If I'm-
as
if
I
I'm-
stated, the management of not having Weiner included in that is the reasoning. That's what I stated.
So as long as the injunction is in place, you do not want to advance the RFP. Is that what you're saying?
Currently, yes, but I believe that we can still sit down and talk about it. And I'm sure that we'll sit down with Mayor and Council and sit down with Chief Leitner. And I'm not saying that I'm open to it, most certainly, but that is my current feeling. I feel like we're isolating Weiner and nothing has been progressing forward with that. And maybe we need to bring in our solicitor to have that conversation as well.
So until the injunction is lifted, you're not comfortable moving forward with the parking RFP. Thank you for that. Mayor Kirkland, I think you were about to say something.
Yes, I will, and I didn't hear the councilman say what you stated at the end, but let me just start off by saying this. The RFP was never really clarified, and I talked to Mr. Leitner about that in my reservations when it came to putting out the RFP. I want to step back just a little bit to say that it would always be nice if we were able to have our legal representation, our solicitor on these calls, but that's not allowed. But he was muted last time he was on these calls so that we could have our legal beagle, such as Mr. Kapoor does for yourself and your team, be a part of these conversations. Let me just say this. The residents and our businesses are running into a lot of confusion. As you see, downtown Chester is now one big giant parking lot. And it's one big giant parking lot because we removed the parking authority, the parking management personnel. Whether right or wrong, or whether we could modify it, now we're in worse shape than we were when we had a parking authority, when we had parking management. Prior to us having parking management, and I too have documentation, Mr. Core. Prior to us having parking management, myself and my solicitor met with the legal personnel from Widener University back on February the 26th in 2020. When we met with that personnel, we discussed the parking, and they assured us and talked with us and said, you know what? If we have parking or meters, or if we don't have parking meters, we want to be supportive of the city, and we want to provide them with some finances in lieu of taxes, regardless whether we have parking or don't have parking. And so it started off with $250,000 check that we put into the city's general fund, $250,000. And if anyone wants to see this check, I have it in my possession. We'd be more than glad to share it with each and every one. And so I wanted to start off with that by saying we had already started this process of working with Widener University and making sure that the city would receive funds in lieu of taxes. I also want to talk about, I heard Mr. Kapoor say that I was not in a meeting, and I talked with my administrative assistant. I had a personal matter, and I said, please let them know that I will not be at the meeting. I didn't know, I apologize, because I didn't know that I had to say I may have had a headache, car accident, something else. I didn't know I had to be specific as an adult when I'm not going to make it to a meeting. Simply relayed the message that I would have a personal matter. And I shared that, and I'm pretty sure that my administrative assistant shared that with others. We talking about a cost out study now in February. We have been, and we have been trying to find out about this cost out study. We didn't know if it was real, if it was live or Memorex, and we've been talking about this forever. Because as was stated, we cannot just put all this on the backs of our residents and then Widener University come into play and we don't have or are not allowed to place meters at Widener. I understand we're in court. I understand that. What I don't understand is how one stays in court for 3 to 4 years over a conversation about who owns the curbs or the streets. And we've been talking about, as I stated before, cost out study. My problem was, and still is, we asked the question, does the receiver has the authority to enter into contracts? Does he have the authority to enter into the contract, even though the judge says that he doesn't? On page 817 and 18 of our legal document, the notice of appeal to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania request, and it says on page 18, the court concludes that Act 47 does not grant receiver the power to unilaterally enter into contract on the city's behalf. That's what it says. And so we went into a contract with Widener University, Mr. Receiver, you went into a contract with Widener University, a contract that has been put forth for the next 10 years. And what confuses me and scares me a little bit is this. On page 2 of that contract, it reads like this. This agreement shall be wholly contingent upon the city's ability to comply with section 4 hereof in its entirety. And section 4 says, parking accommodation. In exchange for Widener's consideration to the city agrees during the term hereof and any renewal term within the Widener campus area to A, not to install parking meters, and B, not to impose or enact parking restrictions or parking programs of any type, style, or manner, and C, not to impose or enact parking permit regulations or programs of any type, style, or manner. It goes on to read, in addition, the city and or receiver shall make best efforts to cause all parking meters, poles, kiosks, and any other related apparatus, collectively the parking equipment, installed or placed within the Widener campus area to be removed within 90 days of execution of this agreement. Now, I'm kind of taken aback because this was signed September the 1st. We're 6 months in. We're 6 months in, and we have done none of these things that they required of us. Not one sign has been moved. Not one line has been removed. We've done nothing, so we're already out of compliance with the contract. My fear is what happens now? Do we have to give Widener back that $325,000 because we're out of compliance with the contract?
No, we don't. No, we don't.
No, sir. I didn't interrupt you. I did not. I listened.
I'm just answering your question, Mayor.
I listened.
The answer is no.
I listened. I did not interrupt you, Mr. Kapoor. And so these are the things that are placed before us. And you're saying, and you pop off with an answer, but that's not what the contract says. And myself, nor my solicitor were involved in any of these contract negotiations. We never had a conversation, and we never were invited for a conversation with Widener University and yourselves. It just was done. That's not fair, especially when you're doing something on the city's behalf. So those are just a few of the things. And then it's 10 years. 10 years, $325,000. 10 years for $3.5 million. We did a contract with Covanta for 10 years. We're trying to negotiate a contract with Covanta for 10 years for $300,000. And that was on top of the host fees that we're already getting from Covanta. $300,000 for 10 years. That would have been $3 million. But because of the receiver's offices and the receiver's team, they voided that contract, and Covanta used this option to do a 3-year deal without the $300,000. There was money on the table for the city to help the city financially. And we were not supported in that. Basically, we were told it's not going to happen. So yes, I have my concerns. We'll continue addressing the concerns. We have a real situation here when it comes to parking in our city. It's real. Now persons are parking up on the curbs. They're destroying the infrastructure, as you see when you go down certain streets, because there is no parking management company in place. We need a parking management company. We need that type of help. But we need to be on the same page, and we need to be open and honest with one another as we move forward. My concern is, once again, do we follow the judge's orders, we being the city? Are we wrong, or are we taking the court when we don't follow the judge's orders? But it's okay where it's here in black and white when the receiver doesn't follow the judge's orders, that's fine. I'm done.
Thank you, Mayor Kirkland. As Mr. Kapoor alluded to earlier, the city has every right to challenge any decision made, but to stick to the issue at hand, what is your plan for moving the city forward? And the parking, related to parking enforcement and a study, what is your plan to move the city forward?
Well, my plan has already been in place. My plan was thwarted by the courts. Our plan in moving the city forward is having a management team here in the city, hiring city residents, which we did, hiring city residents, making sure those areas in our city, Nova Vista, over there by Crozier Hospital and other areas by Widener, that our seniors are able to come home and park in front of their homes without being boxed out by others, that persons with disabilities or handicap signs are able to park in their areas. The plan is to bring in a management team, such as the one we just had, because I believe, matter of fact, I know that PFS has tried to reach out to you and your team, sir, and try to do some modifications, but they were thwarted. So the plan is to bring in, to work with, the plan is to work with you. The plan is to work with others to make sure we have a good, supportive parking management team here, management company here in the city that provides safe and effective services for all of our cities.
So you would like a third party to come in and manage. How would you like to move forward to accomplish that?
Well, I guess we have to move forward by finding out if in fact you have the authority to come in to go into contract with Widener University.
The Widener agreement has nothing to do with parking enforcement throughout the city.
That's what you say, but we don't believe that.
But yet you haven't challenged it in court. That doesn't add up. How do we move forward with the study? How do we move forward with the study and parking enforcement?
It's hard to challenge it in court, Mr. Receiver, because every time we do something in court, you can either authorize for our lawyers to be paid or not to be paid.
That hasn't stopped you from showing up with representation in every last hearing.
And when we show up with our lawyers have not been fully paid. Our lawyers cannot keep working on our behalf and we can't pay them.
And the city solicitor has no role in this. He doesn't have the ability to file any of these actions.
Well, my solicitor's not here because you won't let him speak.
You as the CEO of the city have 2 appointments to this committee. You've chosen to appoint yourself and Councilman Morgan. You could just as easily appoint Attorney Solicitor Schuster.
I want Attorney Solicitor Schuster on these meetings, and you will
Again,
speak. But
you have that right. You have chosen not to
but
appoint him to this committee.
Mr. Kapoor is not a member of this committee. Just as he said at the last meeting, he's not a member of this committee, but he has more to say or more opportunity to say things did anyone else on this committee.
Okay, so again, we're getting sidetracked. Who's on this committee has nothing to do with parking enforcement, and how do we move forward from this point? 3 judges have now said you got to move forward. Judges have already said we can't modify the agreement, which you again just asked us to do. We can't do that. We have to start over. The only way to start over in municipal bidding is to issue an RFP.
I'm not asking you to modify it now because you've, like you said, you've already terminated the parking company. So I'm not asking you to modify anything right now. There has to be a starting point. We have to start all over. I just want to make sure that when we go into agreements or contracts with Widener University, number one, are you the sole person that is allowed?
Again, that agreement has no bearing on us, on the city issuing an RFP.
Yes, it does, sir.
No, it is an injunction since 2019. This agreement with Widener to provide some compensation to the city in the interim has nothing to do with completing a study and bringing in temporary enforcement. So which you said you want. You want a third party, you want a study. This is the way to do it.
I want a contract that the city has a portion of, that the city has some say in.
You want a contract that the city has some say in, to
Yes.
which we could refer back to the original parking agreement, which yielded no benefits to the city. Very little, I should say. Shouldn't say nothing.
It yielded very little because it was in court. If it had held up and it was not in court, the benefits would have been great.
And you agree that it being in court since 2019 had nothing to do with my office.
I never said that.
I didn't file the injunction. I'm not the reason why there's an injunction in place and why readers can't go and widen their campus.
I never said
Further, as Mr. Kapoor stated, PFS has already made it clear they are not interested in an agreement that does not include Widener campus. So we have to go back out for another bid. We have to find another vendor.
And guess what? And I know that. I look forward to us trying to go back out there and do that without Widener being included.
So again, I asked, what is your plan? How do we practically issue this RFP? What changes do we need to make in the RFP language to make city council comfortable with advancing it?
Well, that plan, I'll share that plan with you and with members of council.
Okay, so from Councilman Morgan, we've heard the injunction is his concern. And today we're hearing from you that you will share something at a later date. So where does that leave us now? And why was this voted down if you can't articulate what the concerns are?
I did.
Why weren't those concerns given at the last city council
articulate
meeting?
those concerns. And I also talked with Mr. Leitner about my concerns and my reservations concerning this. I just have finished telling you about this so-called contract and us not having, myself and my legal staff not having any input in that contract.
That's not true. There's been a draft RFP available and around for circulation since last summer. It has been at least 8 months of us working on a draft RFP. When you're saying you're going to articulate your concerns.
I have never been involved in this contract. Never.
The agreement with Widener, again, that has no bearing on the parking RFP.
But yes, it does. To you, it doesn't. To you, it doesn't. We have never been involved in the writing or the execution of this contract. Never.
And Widener saying, even though there's an injunction in place, we're going to provide the city $325,000 a year. That's the reason why you won't move forward with a study and enforcement for the parking lot as you described it downtown.
Mr. Dowry, I'm not moving forward because at this point, no, because I think there needs to be some more conversation. I think there needs to be some more input, a lot more input from both the city and its officials. I don't think that we have had that opportunity. I think that when it was closed down, when you shut everything down, more chaos and more confusion came into play here at the city.
Well, this, just for the record, for the committee, I'll say since prior to the judge's ruling, last September, Judge Seitzler's ruling and determining that the contract was void, we started to put plans in place or a motion to draft an RFP. Draft RFP language has been circulated for the last 8 months. So this is ongoing and we'll continue. We'll continue to press forward. Thank you, Councilman. We'll continue to press forward, but the thought of needing more time to update language or get everyone comfortable, I'll just say that we're ready to move forward. It's just unfortunate that from 4 of the city council and mayor, not all, Councilman Roots excluded, seem to still have reservations or concerns, but have not yet to articulate anything that is something that would stop this process from happening. So thank you, Councilman and Mayor, for your responses. Are there any other questions from the committee or concerns or comments?
I mean, I'll just say from my perspective, I don't really understand. I mean, I've been sitting on these meetings and I understand like the timeline of events, but I just don't understand what this Widener contract has to do with this current RFP. I don't understand why the RFP can't be issued. And I keep hearing about discussion about modification. Well, perhaps, you know, a vendor could be selected to do this temporary parking management, and then that contract could be modified in the future if the injunction ceases. I don't really quite understand sort of stopping this process when, like, we're describing chaos of residents not being able to park in front of their houses, businesses having issues with parking. I would like to hear like a specific reason why this RFP can be issued, and maybe a timeline for when a discussion will happen and when it will be issued, so that residents know what to expect and when they can watch that RFP get issued at a future council meeting. Nothing? Okay. I mean, I guess that's the answer then.
Sorry about that, Ms. Diaz. Mr. Chief, or
No, I have no comments or questions at this time.
okay. So we made it through the parking. There is still one other item to present. Mr. Kapoor, would you mind presenting that item on my behalf?
Oh, sorry, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so the second area of that we wanted to bring to the committee's attentions regarding city inspections, and specifically the hiring of an individual to serve as the deputy director of inspectors. Also at the last council meeting on March 8th, the mayor and 3 members of council, again, not council member Roots, refused to move forward with the hiring of a qualified individual for the position of deputy director of inspections. Again, you can look at the link on the city council page. The main complaint appeared to be that this individual being considered for the position was not from Chester. This position, and I'll talk about it in a moment, is very health and safety related, and is necessary to manage several important codes related programs, which again are going to impact the health and safety of residents. Those of you who watched the last MFRAC meeting on February 28th, you may remember Chief Leitner put out kind of his plan going forward. And one of the areas that he talked about making improvements on that he wanted to act rather quickly on were as it related to code enforcement areas, specifically because of the health and safety issues. And I'll say for this position, the salary and benefits of this position was included in the 2023 budget, which was passed unanimously in last year. So to talk about the position for a moment, the Deputy Director of Inspectors position, the purpose of that position is to oversee really 4 programs that relate to health and safety of city residents, and also would include supervising inspectors who would enforce them. And those 4 programs, 2 of which still need to be implemented by the city, but we believe are going to be on the March 20th council agenda. Those 4 programs, the first is a rental registration program. And currently Chester is one of the few cities in Pennsylvania that doesn't have such a program. And what that does is it ensures that landlords keep rental properties up to code. It requires an annual inspection, again, to ensure that rentals, which make up a pretty significant portion of housing in Chester, are up to code and are inspected. Currently, again, Chester does not have such a program, but hopefully will be included soon. The second is a vacant property registration program. This one addresses blighted properties. This program is already being done by a third party. The purpose would be for the Deputy Director of Inspections to really closely manage it and to oversee it and to make sure the vendor is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and that action is taken when necessary. And that's what we're missing right now in the city, and why Chief Leitner wanted this position. The third program that this individual would oversee is enforcement of lead ordinances, again, to make sure that's addressed, and lead paint otherwise in homes, and I think that kind of speaks for itself as the health and safety importance. And then finally, again, another new program is something that's referred to as a pre-sale program. And what that program does is it will ensure that any residential building being sold is code compliant. So if a residential building it's going to be sold, what it does is it requires a certificate to ensure that it's up to code. And again, all of these taken together have to do with city property, have to do with oversight of city property, and oversight of inspectors who would enforce the code related ordinances, again, to make sure health and safety is taken care of here in Chester. So again, this position was part of the budget. This was contemplated to be filled this year, and the city posted that position of deputy director starting December 23rd and continuing through February 14th on all social media platforms in City Hall, and also on the Union Board, which is typically where these positions have been posted. And again, the receiver, as many of you know, at these MFRACs always talks about positions that are open, and encourages people to come and take a look and apply. Now, the job description included this experience requirement here on slide 31. So basically a minimum of 5 years of experience in code enforcement, rental registration, vacant property, pre-sales, property maintenance programs, et cetera. And also 3 years of supervisory experience, such as disciplining, evaluating the performance of, and recommending hiring, firing, and promotion of subordinate staff. So if you look at this, I mean, really looking at experience, managing similar type of programs that I laid out here, and also having supervisory experience, both of which are key to these, because again, these are pretty key programs. City received 5 applications, and then a subcommittee of 2 city staff. So 1 individual from the HR department and the building code official, as well as a member of the receiver's team, who is the receiver's economic development and codes lead, and actually an individual who managed similar types of programs previously, interviewed the candidates and made a recommendation to the chief of staff. And that individual met the experience requirement that I noted in the previous slide. Chief of staff accepted the subcommittee's recommendation, directed an offer letter be sent to the individual, which was sent on March 2nd. Receiver is supportive of offering the position to this individual, but on March 8th, the mayor and 3 members of council refused to ratify the hire. There was a motion to approve this individual. Councilmember Roots made that motion, being in favor of doing so, and it failed for a lack of a second. So The receiver would like to move forward with hiring this individual for the Deputy Director of Inspectors. It is critical to the health and safety of Chester's residents that we have someone in that position that has professional experience managing similar programs in other communities. Again, this is a similar theme to what the receiver did when he went in with the plan modification in November of last year of ensuring that we have experienced professional staff managing key areas, including those affecting health and safety. This individual has that experience managing similar programs in the city of Allentown. And again, as we know, the recovery plan provides the receiver with the ability to hire and fire city employees. That is the provision here from the recovery plan. The receiver shall have the sole ability to initiate or approve any hiring. Again, this is an area that's of key importance. It is an area that Chief Leitner is trying to move forward with, that has identified an experienced professional individual who could fill that position and wants to move forward with it, and currently is unable to do so. And again, we wanted to bring this in front of MFRAC for discussion, and that's what we're doing here today.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Bringing us to the committee for discussion. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from the committee members?
Sorry, the receiver is bringing this to the committee to hire the inspector.
No, really just for discussion, Mr. Chief.
Oh.
We're not looking for approval here. It's another area here where hopefully we can perhaps resolve it. But we're bringing it to the attention of the committee again in the event we need to go into court to enforce the receiver's abilities under the recovery plan.
Duty to meet and discuss. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Yes. Oh, great. I'm sorry.
I think it's you, Mayor.
Okay. Yes. First of all, I just want to say that we have been, and I have been adamant about trying to do our best to bring back employees that were already employed by the city of Chester, and who have the skill set to do the jobs that we are asking of them. We had in place a municipal health service director. It's on the chart, and that position was removed. Said it didn't, I guess they no longer needed that position. When I look at the resume of the individual that was being considered, I looked at the resume and I see they have an associate's degree, 2 associate's degrees. And I look at the one pager, the resume that the individual has. We have in place that individuals that we have either laid off or are currently working here in this city who have not been considered, not even given a call, and they have master's degrees. I know at one point we're talking about how the skill set that this individual has, but we have people who are working here in the city that have the skill set, that have the degrees, and we have not considered even giving them a call or bringing them back. I do take issue with that. And the individuals that we're bringing in or soon want to bring in, we're willing to pay them, much more than they were making where they are, or more than the persons that were here, that were currently here working. Their salaries are less than what we're proposing to give to this individual. I hear you, Ms. Kapoor, in your attempt to, praise Councilman Roots for, I guess, trying to move the motion. But at the same time, I did not hear you say anything. This is a department that he is over. I didn't hear you say anything about him not being involved in the interviews of this person. I was not involved. I didn't get a chance to be involved in the interviews. The councilman was set up and had appointments to be in 2 interviews. and did not show for either interview, but at the same time was prepared to move on this individual, make the motion on this individual to be put in place when he had not even interviewed the individual. Do we need the position filled? Yes, we do. We have people in our departments that can do the jobs. I mean, I've talked to Mr. Leitner, and we've talked about those persons who, I guess, came close to being accepted as the individuals to head up that department, and having to train them and not having the time. It's a 2-hour ride from where this individual will be coming from. And if that individual goes back home and we have an emergency here, it's another 2-hour ride, possibly, to come back, 4 hours all together, back and forth. We have people that we kind of discard, and that's troubling because it does not encourage Chester residents to step up to the plate, especially when you have residents who have already sat in these positions. And now, rather than say, why don't we pick up the phone and make a phone call and bring back staff? Because that's what a lot of businesses and corporations do. If they have a person that they laid off and they have experience, you bring them back because you won't miss a beat. But we haven't done that. And so that's my hesitancy with this situation. We have people here that can and are capable of doing that job, and we should bring them back and put them back to work.
Trying to weave through a lot you said there, but it sounds like you're disappointed in the recruiting efforts of HR, which at that time were under the direction of Councilman Morgan. So that's one issue in itself. Of the 5 applicants that apply for this particular position, this person is the best qualified, the most qualified for this particular position. No one else can say that they have experience in running a rental registry program for the city of Chester, considering the city of Chester has never had a rental registry program. So it would make sense to bring in someone from the outside to help establish a new program in the city of Chester. Are there any other comments from the committee?
Yes, I'll make a comment. The HR department has always done the same type of outreach when it comes to looking for employment here in the city of Chester, and that is posting on our social media platform, City of Chester platform, and through many of shares, and also posting on our website. So with your most recent comment, as you know, we've tried to advance our outreach and tried to do other things to get, I guess, more of a pool of people to potentially apply to these positions. And the one way that we've thought about doing that is by setting up an Indeed account. As you might know, we do not have a debit or credit card to set up an Indeed account, but that is something that the Protivity team has been working on for, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 months. So that has not been addressed at all as of yet. When it comes to myself not agreeing to move forward with this position or this person, it wasn't, of course, brought to me until Monday, similar to how it was brought to the other individuals about other individuals such as mayor and council about who we were looking to potentially hire for the position. I did try to come into that interview because since this is this is a very important role here in the city of Chester and the public safety department. There should be someone from council that is aware of this, what's going on, the steps, and who we're looking to hire here for the city of Chester, for our residents. And because the councilman was not there, I knew that it was important for someone else to be there. I don't know why and or how. Well, it wouldn't be me, I would say.
I most certainly would want to know who's being hired within the department and how they'll fit within the department. So for the councilman, he'll have to answer for him to, I guess, to agree to move on something that he had no insight on and no knowledge of, or did not meet with the individual. For me, I would not do something like that. And as I stated for the record in the comments on the council meeting, I believe that we should table this resolution for deeper and further discussion, because it was brought to us on Monday, and because the councilman, who I believe should be privy to be a part of that meeting, or should meet the candidate prior to being hired. Addition to that, there was a request for I guess, an offer letter to be sent to the candidate prior to the resolution. I think that is putting the cart before the horse. And I did have a discussion with Chief Leitner in regards to that. So I know it's a position here that we need in order to move forward with the ordinances and the programs that we're trying to do here in the city of Chester. I do firmly believe that we have employees in that department that can most certainly take that position on and do a great job with it. When I looked at the candidate's resume, it was roughly a half a page and or 3/4 of a page. When we speak of qualified, I guess the qualification of it is that the individual has done the program for, I don't know how many years, but has done the program for a few years. There isn't any certifications. There is anything about that outside of that as far as comparing when we're comparing to other candidates that were a part of that, a part of the interview process. And for me, you can teach and or individuals can learn multiple things when they go into a role. And I firmly believe that if there is another individual that is qualified, because I believe that our people is qualified, not only because I feel like they have the experience with working within the city of Chester, but they know the city of Chester and they're residents here as well. I think that they most certainly should have that opportunity. But again, I asked to table it, not because I wouldn't agree to hire the individual, but I don't think that the process was inclusive of everyone, since it's a very important position here in the city of Chester.
Thank you, Councilman. Again, number of things to unpack there. As the former director of HR or overseeing that department along with finance, I find it hard to reconcile that with you not knowing about this election until the Monday before the city council meeting. Further attempts to post on Indeed or other are to increase the reach and of our recruiting efforts. I don't think Indeed would be the medium to get in contact with former employees that have been laid off, or residents who still may be interested in a position. Lastly, all of this is missing the point of what's been laid out in the recovery plan and supported by Commonwealth Court Judge Seisler, that City Council and the mayor no longer have the authority to hire and fire. That power rests solely with me. So I'm interjecting yourselves into the interviewing process and saying that anything was wrong with it doesn't add up to what's in the recovery plan. And although items were appealed to the state Supreme Court, this was not one of them. So everything you're doing post the decision from Judge Seisler is contrary to her ruling and is questionable territory. It's not me to say what it means on the legal grounds. Is there any other comments from the committee? Are there any other comments from the committee?
Just to comment on that. The first thing you said, no, I wasn't aware until deliberative meeting on that Monday that was the intent to hire that individual. So that's that. And then when it comes to, I didn't say you don't have the authority to hire and fire. What I'm talking about is the inclusion. I wouldn't expect, and maybe you would, but I'm just speaking from when it comes to a police officer, most certainly the mayor and council or firefighter should have some inclusion on who's out there with our residents, who's speaking to our residents, who's serving our residents, who's saving our residents. And that's the respect that I think that the councilman should have when it comes to those types of interviews and those meetings. So that's what I'm speaking to.
And to that end, you were invited. Why you didn't participate, I can't speak to it. Are there any other comments from the committee?
Yes. You just said that we don't have the authority to hire and fire, and you're correct. And sir, but we do have the authority to pass resolutions, to not pass resolutions. We do have the authority to speak on behalf of those professionals that are present here in this community. We do have the authority to speak on the professionalism of those individuals who at one time worked for this city and this community and who have now been laid off and not called back. We do have the authority to talk about the work that they've done in this community and the wealth that they possess in helping this community move forward, not just today, but in past times as well. And we do have the authority to recognize their abilities, and we will continue to do so.
Speaking specifically to the authority of a resolution, are you stating that the mayor and council will not pass a resolution in support of this hire?
I just simply told you what our authority is, sir.
Could you answer the question?
I'm not in the court of law. I just simply told you what our authority is, sir.
Okay, so you intend not to answer the question?
There you
All
go
right,
again. There you go again.
I'm asking you a question and you're not answering it. Okay,
I've
are
answered
you
the
and
question.
Councilman Morgan?
I just
are
told you what we have. You said what your authority was. And I just told you what ours was. That's as simple as that.
I understand. And just like the parking RFP, I'm asking, what is the plan moving forward? So
I would hope the plan would be that we would look at those individuals that have worked in that same department or that continue to work in that same department, that have degrees, master's degrees, college degrees, not associate degrees, that have degrees and have the talent and the skill set to head up that department. I would hope we would do that because there are a number of them that are from Chester.
this position was posted for 2 months and we have a qualified individual ready to start.
We said the same thing about our chief financial officer a little while ago too.
And because of the back and forth and the delays in hiring, we lost our candidate and had to go back out to hire again. We do not want to miss this person and miss this opportunity.
No, I wasn't talking about that one. I was talking about the first one. The one that came in and we messed up 2 payrolls.
Okay, well, you want to put that on that person. Okay, that adds up. Does anyone else have anything for the committee for the discussion today? Mr. Kapoor, okay, thank you. That concludes our presentations today. Before departing, does anyone else have anything for the good of this meeting? I want to thank you all for participating. Unfortunately, sometimes we're going to have to bring some uncomfortable conversations to this committee as we continue to move forward. So we'll keep the committee posted on next steps, and we look to reconvene March 28th. Thank you. Have a good day.